morning, wherever you are. We're coming at you from the studio in Kelowna. We have no sense of who's on the other side of this camera, so I hope you're connecting together in the chat. We're just going to sing together this morning and just believe that God is going to flood our homes and speak to us in the ways that we need to hear Him, as He always does. So, come on, why don't you join with us today? Just put down your food or whatever you've got going on, and let's just take a moment to welcome God. Your favor waits within the future. My dreams are small compared to yours. Why should I worry about tomorrow when I know that all I gotta do is trust you, Lord? Every little thing's gonna be alright. Every little thing's gonna be just fine. Whether I can see it now, I know you will work it out for good. Every little thing, everything will be alright. Behind the scenes and in the details, you plan the perfect way for me. Why should I dwell upon the road's uncertainties when all I gotta do is look to you? Yeah, all I gotta do is look to you. Come on, sing it out wherever you are. Every little thing's gonna be alright. Every little thing's gonna be just fine. Whether I can see it now, I know you will work it out for good. Every little thing, everything will be alright. Oh, oh, oh. Every little thing's gonna be alright. Every little thing's gonna be just fine. Whether I can see it now, I know you will work it out for good. Every little thing, everything will be alright. Let's sing that chorus again. Every little thing's gonna be alright. Every little thing's gonna be just fine. Whether I can see it now, I know you will work it out for good. Every little thing, everything will be alright. Everything will be alright. Everything will be alright. Yeah. Awesome. The wind is changing, a page is turning. Throughout the nations, there's something stirring. The earth is waiting, anticipate. Let God arise, revival is in the air. Can you feel it coming? Can you hear the sound? Like a mighty rushing wind from heaven. Wake up, oh sleeper, get up from the grave. The dawn is breaking in glorious grace. Breathe in, exhale, salvation is here, alive in Jesus, not bound by the grave. The breath of heaven, the Holy Spirit, His very presence alive within us. With tongues of fire, we're prophesying. Dry bones arise, revival is in the air. Can you feel it coming? Can you hear the sound? Like a mighty rushing wind from heaven. Wake up, oh sleeper, get up from the grave. The dawn is breaking in glorious grace. Breathe in, exhale, salvation is here, alive in Jesus, not bound by the grave. Oh sleeper, get up from the grave. The dawn is breaking in glorious grace. Breathe in, exhale, salvation is here, alive in Jesus, not bound by the grave. Can you feel it coming? Can you hear the sound? Our God is moving. Our time is now. Can you feel it coming? Can you hear the sound? Like a mighty rushing wind from heaven. Can you feel it coming? Can you hear the sound? Our God is moving. Our time is now. Can you feel it coming? Can you hear the sound? Like a mighty rushing wind from heaven. Wake up, oh sleeper, get up from the grave. The dawn is breaking in glorious grace. Breathe in, exhale, salvation is here, alive in Jesus, not bound. Come on, one more time. Oh wait, oh sleeper, get up from the grave. The dawn is breaking in glorious grace. Breathe in, exhale, salvation is here, alive in Jesus, not bound by the grave, not bound by the grave. Yes, God. Thank you, God. Yes, God, we just believe that, God, that spirits are being awoken this morning. God, that you are revitalizing, you are re-energizing, you are restoring, God. We just believe that you are the God who does that. Thank you, Heavenly Father. Let's sing one last song together this morning before we hear from Pastor Josiah and Pastor Dave. God, I just ask this morning that you would remind every person who's watching or listening, engaging with this, God, that you would just remind them that you are the caretaker. That you are the caretaker of our needs, God. The ones we've thought of, the ones that we haven't, God. You have exactly what we need when we need it. God, would you just bring a sense of calm to every heart this morning, a sense of hope. Just remind us that you're in control, God. In the morning you sing over me. I receive your mercy. Your faithfulness is clear to me. It's constant every day. In the morning you sing over me. I receive your mercy. Your faithfulness is clear to see. It's constant every day. Every breath I breathe, an invitation to believe you are creating something good. Though this season doesn't tell my story, I know you'll move mountains for me. You're just that good. So I'll give thanks to God when I don't have enough, 'cause He's more than enough, and He knows what I need. So I'll give thanks to God when I don't have enough, 'cause He's more than enough, and He knows what I need. Yeah. Oh, yeah. In the silence I choose to believe you're working in the waiting. Though the future isn't clear to me, I'll trust you anyway. Every breath I breathe, an invitation to believe you are creating something good. Though this season doesn't tell my story, I know you'll move mountains for me. You're just that good. So I'll give thanks to God when I don't have enough, 'cause He's more than enough, and He knows what I need. So I'll give thanks to God when I don't have enough, 'cause He's more than enough, and He knows what I need. Oh,
realizing recently that God loves our voice. There's nothing as sweet as our personal worship to him. So we hope you took time. Hey, my name's Josiah, and I get the privilege of being one of the pastors in this church. And today we are launching a new series. We are calling it Current Affairs.
Not the CBC show.
Is that a show?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not up on the CBC. But we're calling it Current Affairs, and we want to talk about some topics that are relevant today. Something that I've realized as I've been reading through the Bible over the number of years is Jesus was asked a lot of questions about the topics of the day.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of things, obviously we could talk about the last year and a half of what's changed dramatically in our world. But beyond just that specific thing, there's been so many other things that have changed along the world. And we want to dig into those today. So today we're talking about a specific area, I guess,
Sure.
Called cancel culture. Now, I don't know about you. You might be sitting there right now and being like, oh, I can't get, every day all I hear about is cancel culture. Or you might be sitting there being like, what in the world is he talking about?
We might have just got canceled by somebody.
Maybe. Or just like eye rolled. I don't know, whatever it is. But let me tell you a little bit about cancel culture. And what we're going to do for these next 5 weeks is we're going to dig into specific topics. Next week or next Sunday service, we're talking about purity culture and the church. And we're going to be digging into these topics to gain some insight, because there's a lot of voices that are telling us what we should believe or what we should do in the world. And so often we forget to actually include the authoritative voice of Jesus into the things in our world. It's like this last song we just listened to where it says, why do I worry? And there's a scripture that tells us, instead of worrying, pray. Because then you cast all your worries onto Jesus, who can care for them, who can carry them. Anyway, so we want to dig into these. If you are on YouTube right now and you have a chat function, you're welcome to fill in questions as we go, and if we can, we'll address them. But I'm excited to have Pastor Dave to ask some questions. You may not know this about Pastor Dave, but Pastor Dave loves questions. There isn't a question you can ask him. It might throw him off a little bit, but he's open to all questions.
I do like questions.
Yeah, and as a church, we love questions.
Yeah.
Whether it's about your faith or things that you're going through, we love questions because we still believe that Jesus is answers to questions. So let me tell you a little bit of cancel culture, and then I'm going to ask Pastor Dave some questions, and we're going to go from there. So the first question, or the first thing I want to tell you about is cancel culture. It actually emanates from about 3 years ago from something called call-out culture. Call-out culture was initiated during what we'd call the Me Too movement, right, when there was the advancement and the outcry against sexual injustice and sexual harassment in the workplace or in various other places. So the idea was to call out people who had sexually abused, sexually harassed people. And what's evolved over time is this idea called cancel culture. And cancel culture is sort of modern day ostracization. It's where you ostracize someone because of their actions or the things they've said. You've probably heard of an idea of cancel culture, and probably you've actually been involved in it, whether you'd use the term or not. We have cancel culture, and generally cancel culture has to do with either a bigotry of some sort, a racist comment, a political ideology, transphobia. Any of these sort of things tends to lead to cancel culture. It's you doing something or saying something against a group of people. Now, we don't want to dig specifically into sexual harassment, race culture. Those are the things we're trying to dig into today. Of course, we're going to end up touching on them a little bit. But you may have heard of people who've been canceled, if you will. Cancel culture is affecting Ellen DeGeneres. Ellen DeGeneres,
Sure.
Her show is shutting down because of a toxic workplace accusations. And so that's, in turn, ends up being canceled. You may have heard of Kevin Spacey a number of years ago. He had some sexual harassment. I don't know if they're actually accusations or charges, but I know during that time, Kevin Spacey movies were taken down from streaming services or any of those sort of things. They were all essentially a misconduct took you out of everything, whether your workplace, your family, all of those sort of things. We have it in church life as well. You have Carl Lentz, who's had a moral failure, And I would
Carl
guess
Lentz was the pastor of Hillsong Church in New York
pastor
City.
was Hillsong NYC, and last year it came out that he had a moral failure, and I would guess that the majority of us have canceled him, have disregarded and no longer follow any of his teaching or any of those things. And I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong. We also have, Mark Driscoll. A number of years ago, he had some accusations on him for toxic workplace as well, and some other stuff. Anyways, this is something that affects us dramatically. So cancel culture is the ostracization of someone after they've done something, and it's prevalent right now. Pastor, what do you have to say about cancel culture?
Well, it's not new. I think we just put a title on it.
Right.
Truthfully, I think it comes out of a feeling on our part that we're qualified to judge somebody and issue a judgment, which is, I think, personally, is kind of a dangerous spot to get into.
To be judging people?
Well, judging people. I mean, Jesus didn't even judge. He said, I didn't come to judge people. He said, that's, later on, let's do that at the end of life. Let's not judge people in the middle of their life. The biggest, just as we're talking about, one of the biggest problems I find with the cancel culture is not that it's recognizing problems.
Right.
Because it does recognize problems, right?
Right.
It's a response to, a response to something that's not
Indiscretion.
Yeah, the thing that I go is it doesn't take into consideration anything else. I mean, I know sometimes things happen in our life that define our life, but really, as a culture, we're saying, okay, let's let this one event or this one characteristic, let's define that person from then on, and let's make that everything about it. And to me, the classic in Scripture, and I shared this a couple weeks ago, but to me, the classic thing in Scripture that where Jesus could have gotten involved in cancel culture is when the Pharisees brought this woman to him who had been involved in sexual sin, right? So here's a different side, but here's a Me Too moment. Where's the guy? Right? The guy was involved in adultery. It says she was caught in adultery in the very act. There's two people involved. The guy's not there. Me Too moment. But, they said, the Pharisee says, let's cancel her. Right. Essentially, let's kill her.
In a dramatic way.
Pretty dramatic. Yeah, but I mean, for a lot of people, it's been the same thing, cutting off a relationship, saying, I will no longer have a relationship with you.
Workplace, family, everything.
Workplace, all that kind of stuff. It's pretty severe, and, and some people probably would say, I would rather you were dead than you have done that. And so Jesus is confronted with that. He's had that opportunity, and they say, this is what Moses says, we should cancel her. What do you say? Right. To me, that's about as relevant as we get today. And Jesus is, I love Jesus. He's just so cool. He doesn't bite on the bait. He just kind of doesn't respond right away.
Right.
And I think right off the top, that's a huge thing. Cancel culture is reactionary. It's just like, this happened right now, I'm canceling everybody. It's a reaction. And the first thing Jesus does, and we want to be, I would prefer to be more like Jesus than everybody else. I mean, personally, I call myself a Jesus follower. Yeah. Right? So I want to follow more than anything else. I want to follow Jesus. And so he actually just pauses. Like the first thing you see about Jesus in this story, when he's right in the middle of cancel culture, is he pauses. He just stops and he starts writing on the ground. We've got no idea what he's writing, but the key to that is he pauses. And and I think as followers of Jesus, we've got to, when it comes to the opportunity to cancel, all those kinds of things, the reaction, we've got to be able to stop and pause.
That's good.
Because God speaks in a pause. Right? God doesn't speak in our reactions. God doesn't speak in the middle of our anxiety. God speaks in the pause. That's why he says, be still and know that I'm God. He's paused. So Jesus pauses. And then after he pauses, he just poses a question. Or just a little guidance, a little instruction, just a little kind of nudge, and says, great, let's cancel. Let's go ahead, let's cancel. And whoever one of you has never had any sin, and whoever one of you has never, and there's a sense in this telling of the story that he's not just saying any of you have just generally sinned, although that could be taken that way.
Right.
But he's saying, kind of in this whole sexual area.
Anyone who's also been an adulterer.
And anybody who's been, you've had
anyone else who should be canceled as well.
Right. Like think about your life for a minute, and should you be canceled? And if you're cool with that, go ahead.
Right. Like if you want us to go on letter of law here, then let's go letter of law on you, like you're trying to go on someone else.
Yeah, because here's human nature, and even as Christians, we're like this: is we want grace for ourselves and justice, and on everybody else.
It's so much better for me if I give grace and everyone else gets justice. Like that'd be wonderful. Do you feel like you've been involved in cancel culture?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
tell us more.
I mean, I don't say, I wouldn't say that like I kind of jumped on the cancel culture bandwagon. Like I say, it's not a new thing.
Right, fair enough.
It's not a new thing, right? Anytime I have overlooked or extended the judgment of God instead of first offering the grace of God,
wow,
I've gotten involved in cancel culture. And I've said, I think it's, for me, it pains me when I think about it, how many times, maybe I've cut off a relationship or I've stopped talking to anybody because they're behaving a certain way. And there's no room for influence when you cancel.
Right.
And at the core of what our desire is as church and followers of Christ is we're here to influence the world. And when we start canceling the world, we no longer have influence. Right. That cancel works both ways. We cancel somebody, they're canceled in terms of our influence on them. Right. And I'm sure there's plenty of reasons in my life where I should have been canceled. Right. By people, and maybe I have been. I'm sure I have been.
And cancel culture isn't even just like for Christians or those in church. It's not just those who. It's not just cutting people out from outside the world. It happens so much in church life. Like I think in the last year, if I was to be honest, I would have personally canceled people probably predominantly on my social media feed.
And
unfollow. I love you. I don't want you to know that I've unfriended you, but I don't want to see anything from you anymore.
I've done that a little bit, but I've been really careful with that.
Oh, you're more like Jesus than me because I've done it a lot.
No, not at all. I just see the other side to this whole thing is cancel culture. Is basically one of the things that we do in cancel culture is we eliminate anything that would challenge what we currently think.
Wow.
Right, and and that's really broad brushing cancel culture in a massive way. But anytime we eliminate anything that would challenge our thinking, we stop growing. Wow. Right, so like even on my social media feed, I just don't go to my social media feed as much. Right. There's a few people that I just, I canceled them. I did, but I didn't cancel them in all areas. Right. I canceled them in an area where I personally couldn't handle the distress. Right. But I continued to look at them, and I made sure that I didn't cancel everybody that was saying those things. Right. Because if I cancel everybody that's saying those things, then I'm going to get more entrenched in my thinking. And one thing I got to realize is that I'm just not got it all right. I haven't got it all figured out. Right. And, I may think I'm right, but I could be wrong. Yeah. And that's a pretty humbling kind of spot to be. I just, I got to be really gracious with people because it's like Jesus' story, Any of you that don't have any sin in your life, go ahead and cancel. But I'm really aware of my sin. Right. Probably not as much as my wife is, but or my kids, but and other people. But I'm still aware of it, and awareness of your sin, awareness of your, and maybe sin isn't even the right word to use. Awareness of the fact that I've made choices that weren't beneficial. Right, because ultimately the Bible is a very practical book, and although we use the word sin and we put a negative connotation on that because it is, but ultimately sin is a practical condition. It's if I continue to act in this way, it's not beneficial for my life. Right. Yeah. Right. It's not like right or wrong, moral or not moral. You can sum things up a lot easier than that. They have to do with, is this beneficial for me? Is this going to Jesus says, love the Lord the God with your whole heart and your neighbors yourself. Well, when you run it through that filter, then it's not sin. This is beneficial, not beneficial. These things are important that way. So I find that's a really important thing when I recognize that I've done things that weren't beneficial. And I've done things that when I look at others and say, got them canceled, I'm afraid to say anything for fear of being canceled.
Right. Yeah, well, I guess, that's a very real thing. You've got a year, we're doing a service online, or you do a service with people at any point in time. There are people out in a congregation that are, if you say something wrong, that's it. Your influence has been removed.
Yeah.
I guess even when we're talking about the social media and you're saying you go to social media less, I am less Christian than you, so I just unfollow people. But I guess what we're trying to differentiate with, and I guess we haven't said it exclusively, but we think cancel culture isn't directly compatible with the Christian faith in all ways. But one thing about it is it's disregarding the person because of a discretion or a belief.
Yeah, I actually think cancel culture is the very thing the church has been accused of being historically. I think the church has been accused of being judgmental, unwilling to associate with unbelievers, unwilling to talk to people who do wrong things. And I think the church, I guess I'd say, in some ways, the church needs to own up to its own responsibility, the fact that we actually set a pattern of cancel culture.
Well, that's not the direction I thought this conversation was going to go. I'm not sure. So we are the cancel culture, model. You're saying.
Well, think about it. Think about it. Okay, so we're as a church, we are called to engage with people who don't follow Christ.
Right.
That's Jesus' final statement to the church is go out and make disciples, help people understand that Jesus loves them, restore relationship with people. That's the thing. And yet, for years and years and years, what church has done, and I grew up in church. One of the things that we were taught is be separate from the world.
Right.
Right. Don't hang around with people. Basically, don't hang around with people you don't believe in. I mean, within the church itself. We get so many segments and little different denominations who refuse to have anything to do with any other Christians. I mean, we're fragmented, and that's cancel culture. That is cancel culture.
Yeah.
We look at somebody and say, "Well, you're a sinner, so I won't have anything to do with you." Is that not cancel culture? Huh. And yet, that's what the church has done. The biggest criticism I think I've heard of the church over the years is that the church is judgmental, and it's been true. And now we're saying the world's being judgmental, and they're canceling people. You're right. So I think more than anything else, I think it's time that the church stood up and said, let's actually be countercultural. Let's actually be more like Jesus. And instead of being quick to judge, let's be quick to pause.
Yeah.
Let's be quick to offer grace and recognize that judgment is for future, not for now. Let's offer grace, recognizing that I'm a sinner. I've done things that were not beneficial, and as a result, I need to be gracious and merciful. And when we do that, we lay a foundation for conversations, right? Because you can't have relationship without respectful conversation. Cancel culture just says, I don't have time to have a conversation with you.
Right.
I don't want to bother with it. You're not important enough. Let's just cancel you.
Right.
And so I'm saying that person is important. But I believe that every person is important, even somebody with a story that I don't like,
right,
or an opinion that I don't like, or a viewpoint on whatever we're going through that I disagree with.
Yeah.
And yet I am still called to restore a relationship and to have a conversation. And I can't cancel people.
Right.
I just can't cancel people. We can't cancel people. Jesus didn't cancel us.
Right.
That to me, that becomes the huge thing. Jesus just didn't cancel us. He gave us an opportunity to enter into conversation,
right,
to enter into relationship. So when we have that conversation, I think maybe somebody isn't going to like this, but I think cancel culture is a sign of laziness.
What do you mean by laziness?
Because I can't be bothered to walk through this with you. you're not important enough to me, so it's easier for me to cancel you
Right.
than it is for me to have a conversation. Let's quote Carl Lentz, because Carl Lentz is canceled. So I remember early on, as the church on a public level started dealing with how do we embrace or not embrace homosexuality and lesbians, LGBTQ plus. I'm sorry, I don't have all the terminology. Yep. How do we respond to that?
Yep.
And there was a big push in churches to make a statement. You need to make a statement about, your point of, you need to make a statement.
You're either pro or you're against.
Right. Where's your statement? And I'd get the question, where's your statement on your website about homosexuality? And Carl Lentz said something that I thought was really, really insightful. He said, we're not putting a statement out, because when I make a statement, we eliminate the possibility of a conversation.
Right.
And a conversation isn't me laying out my position so that you can lay out your position. That's a debate.
Isn't that the same as a conversation?
No, it's not.
Maybe that's what we all have these days, though, is debates rather than conversations.
We certainly do have debates. And, the online forum, and sadly, COVID has pushed us online. And online eliminates the restrictions of personal conversation.
Super easy.
It makes canceling easy, but it also makes frank conversation really, makes frank conversation more possible. Your filter's gone.
Right.
Right. We filter. So right now we're sitting and I'm having a conversation with you, but I'm filtering what I say by your body language. Somebody said not enough, but I am, right, because I'm wanting to have a conversation. That's human nature. Human nature is to empathize. We humans have this unique ability to change how we interact with people based on what we feel they're feeling.
Totally. That's why I call people and they never answer the phone.
So when we go online,
Yeah.
we eliminate that. So I no longer have any way of filtering my comment.
Emoticons.
Emoticons are a poor substitute. So even preaching, I can be, talking to the camera, I can be a lot harsher because I just don't know how people are responding. I might be looking at the comments on YouTube and trying to gauge something, but I'm not filtering the same. So online conversation has eliminated the filter.
Right.
So we say things, which means we say things that normally we would not say.
We wouldn't say to someone's face. Yeah.
Well, we wouldn't say it because we're still processing and realizing saying that, and as we start down that road, we see the hurt in their eyes. And because we're still human, we're going to back off on that. Right? Now online, we don't do that. I mean, online conversation isn't new. 25 years ago when the internet first started, it was CompuServe and
you
AOL.
had one.
And of course I had one.
Whatever it was, you had one of them.
And I was on a
You
lot
were
of
on the web.
I was.
On the net.
1992 and 91. And I learned really, really early on that online conversations were really difficult. My job is communication. At the end of the day, I'm called to communicate the gospel. That's my job.
Yeah.
And I learned that online conversations deteriorated into arguments really quickly.
Yeah.
And what do you do when you get into a really, really bad argument with somebody? What do most people do?
Walk away.
Walk away.
That's what we've been taught to do.
Cancel culture.
Hey, yeah.
That is cancel culture. We walk away. We're walking away from that person. But it's exactly opposite from what followers of Christ and what Jesus did. You never see Jesus walking away from a conversation. And he'd sit in a room and he'd be doing miracles, and on the edge of the room would be this group of Pharisees, and he knew why they were there.
Yeah.
They weren't there to cheer him on.
To learn more about
They
him.
weren't there to learn. They were
Jesus, convert us, please.
not even sort of. I mean, he knew they were there to criticize everything he did.
To watch him stumble and fall.
To watch him stumble and to trip him up. That was their stated purpose.
Right.
Everybody, and he knew that, and yet he still engaged them.
Yeah, but that just seems stupid to do so, doesn't it? Anyways, you're right. Yeah,
It's scary. It's scary. Okay, so I go back to my original point. I think cancel culture, when we as followers of Christ, when we engage and we allow ourselves to become part of cancel culture, it's kind of lazy. And I know, someone will cancel me over that one, but
Well, I'm thinking about it.
but it's just because, as believers, it's easier not to fight.
Yeah.
As believers, because that's
Well,
what
as
we feels
people.
like we're going to fight.
As people, it's easier not to fight.
But why did Jesus not cancel even the Pharisees?
Well, I guess when you're saying as believers, I think the thing that jumps out at me is, I think what we're talking about is, today cancel culture is prevalent.
Sure.
And I think I recognize it myself with the disconnection of what church is this day.
Yeah, sure.
Like you're saying, it's hard to look at a screen and know how people react. They also, it's much easier to walk out of service than it was before. Like, as preachers, we still know that sometimes you'd stand there, preach, and someone would get up and leave. And that's fun to preach to after that happens. But
You
it's
watch
much,
the YouTube views and you go, okay, halfway through my message.
7 minutes
suddenly
in.
Now
it's like, that's the point they didn't like.
Yeah, we had 70 viewers and all of a sudden it dropped to 50 and went, yeah.
So it's so easy in that, but I know being feeling the disconnection in church life sometimes because relationships were easier when you all showed up at church on Sunday. Now I have to call someone.
Right.
Now I have to send them a message. Now I have to put in some effort. I'm not going to run into them at the cafe, or I'm not going to run into them in those spaces. But I actually find myself not thinking about what is my Jesus response
Right.
to this. I think about what is society's response.
Sure.
Right. So and we're talking about cancel culture, and maybe I think this has been some great information, some great thoughts on this, and I think we've sort of said cancel culture is not Jesus' way, not his natural response. You're saying that cancel culture is lazy. I think cancel culture doesn't give you any place to deal with your forgiveness.
No, it doesn't.
It's actually living in unforgiveness is cancel culture, because I can't deal with what that person said. So instead of worrying about, I guess that's laziness in some ways, or I'm not going to deal with going through that relationship to get over the hurt and the pain or whatever's gone wrong. So I lose out on the chance of forgiveness and therefore lose out on that relationship.
Yeah.
And I choose, and personally, I love people. And anytime I spend time with people these days, I walk out like bright-eyed, remembering how much I love people. And I would never want an opinion or an action or anything to stand in the way for me or for them on our relationship. Which is why, today, this day and age, just having an opinion on masks, vaccines, the church being open, the political agenda behind things, I'd be concerned to say anything because I don't want people canceling me and losing out on the relationship because of that.
Yeah, and some of that's good. Like not
Fear?
Well, no, some of that's good. And I think, and we talked about this before. I think not everything about cancel culture is bad.
Okay.
If it causes us to stop and think before we say something, that's good. Because here's what happens is we separate over meaningless things.
Right.
And if we stop and think about it, so if it causes me, if cancel culture causes me to pause for a moment and go, boy, should I make that anti-vax statement, or should I make that pro-vax statement, or should I make that, whatever it is. If it causes me to pause and think about it and saying, no, for the sake of the people that I love, I'm not expressing an opinion. Well, then I did just what Jesus would do.
And now we're not talking about being opinionless,
Jesus was far from being opinionless.
but I guess what we're talking about is that unfortunately, fortunately, whatever, social media technology has given you a platform that you can say whatever you want and then run away. And I'm the youngest child and love to do that. I say what I want and then just watch the thing explode. But what you're saying is, I do. I love doing that. But what you're saying is the statement disregards and dissolves the ability for conversation. So say, what any of these topics that we could all have opinions on, and we all probably do have opinions on today. I may have opinions. I'm not likely to put them on social media, in my preach, on anything public, because that's the other thing about technology is people
It's
are getting
public forever.
and people are getting canceled for things from 20 years ago because it's a permanent record.
Right.
Now I may have an opinion about these things, but if we were sitting at a coffee shop, I'd share those opinions.
Yeah.
And we would talk about it, but I wouldn't in that platform because I don't want people to disconnect my heart from it.
I can't, right, so I think, and this is the reality of life, is that's made it difficult in this season, is that I can't have an honest conversation online because we can't have a conversation, and online becomes a debate. And, right, we'd sit and we'd have a conversation, we'd respect opinions, we'd allow ourselves to become better because of that conversation. We'd allow ourselves to become more like Jesus. Iron sharpens iron. Yeah. Words of a faithful friend. The problem is we're not encountering each other as faithful friends online. We're encountering each other as debating partners. And it's not, we think, I have this great conversation online. For most people, that's not the case. Right. The comments on your Instagram or your Facebook or your TikTok or whatever are not a conversation. There are statements. Right. There are statements of positions, and we're not having conversations because nobody's getting moved. Nobody's getting shifted.
Yeah. When was the last time someone was convinced from a Facebook thread?
It didn't happen. Yeah. So our response then is cancel. Right? You don't believe the way I believe. It's because we're not having, we're reading somebody's statements and we're responding to a statement. Yeah. But you and I have a conversation together. That's why phone call, even a text messaging is something helpful. It's the one-on-one things that really help us work through those stuff. Yeah. Groups cancel, individuals talk. And I think that's a huge thing that Jesus taught us. Is that in those conversation, because to me, this is one of the telling things to me, is that even though the Pharisees were always out to get Jesus and he engaged them, as you walk through his life, you found that he had Pharisees who believed in him. Yeah. And yet you would think from reading the Bible that every Pharisee was against him, but they weren't, because Jesus engaged them. Right. And so I think that as followers of Christ, we hold a hope out for the world to say, you know what, I am not going to get stuck in a cancel culture. I'm not going to just write people off because Jesus didn't write me off. Right. And I'm going to operate from the perspective that people matter to Jesus. Yeah. And yes, I understand some of cancel culture has come out of trying to right injustice. Yeah, consequences. And I understand that, and I think there's an importance that we don't lose our sense of justice and consequences, but we have to be careful that the consequences are proportionate to the crime, in that sense. And I think that's important. But that we keep our focus the way Jesus did. And Jesus' focus, although he talked about justice, he said justice will come. But in this age, like where we are right now, it's about grace and it's about people. And if we could just come back, and as believers, if we can just come back in our hearts and go, let's start from a place of love. Yeah. I was in devotions the other day. I was reading, and I just can't remember where the passage was. I meant to write it down, but it just talked about how knowledge, everybody has knowledge, but it's actually love that builds the church.
Yeah, knowledge puffs up, love builds.
Yeah, and let's put that in a different opinions. Everybody has an opinion. Mm-hmm. Everybody has an opinion, but opinions actually don't build the church. Right. Opinions don't build relationships.
That's good. That's
love
really good.
Builds relationship. Yeah. Cancel culture is a result of opinion. It might be a right opinion in some people's eyes. It might be a wrong opinion in some people's eyes. Yeah. But it's my action based on my opinion. But love says something else. Love says I put the other person first. Love says, like Jesus did, I put the other person first. I put people ahead of propaganda, people ahead of personal opinion, people ahead of my own opinions, really. And my personality, I like to be right. I feel being right is really important. But I have to carry that being right with this gnawing sense that I still could be wrong. Yeah. Act like I'm right, but have a conversation like I could be wrong.
Act like you're okay. I'll process that one for a little bit. Well, we're going to be closing just shortly here. I wonder if you could have any comment to. So we've talked about cancel culture. We've talked about. I think you've laid out some great reasons why, as Christians and as the church, we need to pause before we disregard, ostracize, remove people. from our personal lives because of opinions or these sort of
Yeah.
things, and to not only just for their benefit, but also for the fact that we need people to challenge us.
Totally.
And transformation happens through challenging
Totally.
of people. Do you have anything that you'd say to someone who's been canceled because they've, indiscretion,
Sure.
said something,
I mean,
posted on Facebook?
Yeah, my first thing was don't retaliate.
Mm.
Like there's just no, you hurt me, therefore I'll hurt you back. Because it's like being ghosted, right? Like,
What's
which
ghosted mean?
Yeah, So without any explanation, it's the person. Kim, my wife and I, we've been married 40 years this year, and the most painful times that I can think of is when we have a conversation and she won't answer me.
Right.
It's because it cuts off conversation. It cuts off. And there's nothing more painful to me than feeling like it's done. There's hopeless. There's nothing else I can do. And one thing that we as a church do, and as followers of Christ, I think we do, is we have to be carriers of hope. Cancel says there's no more hope.
Right.
And so if we've been canceled, I'm not going to retaliate and do the same thing to you. You're no longer my friend on Facebook. I get that. Maybe I can't do anything about that. But I'm not going to stop thinking about you. I'm not going to stop praying for you. I'm not going to stop keeping my attitude right, because all my actions come out of my attitude.
Right.
I'm going to keep my attitude right towards you in the best way I can. And it's not going to be perfect anyways, because it's going to be a huge challenge. I'm going to do my best to keep my attitude right, and to love and to be respectful. I'm not going to put you down. You canceled me, but I'm not going to tell all my friends and go online and post, this person canceled me. Like, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
I'm going to do my best to still treat you the way I want to be treated.
Right.
And I think that as followers of Christ, we got to do that.
Right.
We just got to do it. So that's what I'd say to somebody that's been canceled.
Yeah.
Just, you're still responsible for your actions. You're not responsible for that person's actions, but you're still responsible for your actions from here on out.
Yeah.
Right? You can't change your past actions, and your past actions have brought some results and brought some consequences. I get that.
Yeah.
But you're responsible from this day forward. You're still responsible for your actions going forward.
No, that's very good. That's very good. Well, church, we hope that this has been helpful for you. Next week, we're talking purity culture and the church. We'll be doing these.
Wow.
We'll be doing these sort of topics, or these conversations, these current affairs, not associated with CBC, no relation whatsoever, for the next 5 weeks until Father's Day.
Be fun.
Before we close, just at 11 o'clock here, we have a C3 Kids Zoom call. So if you've got kids in the room, get them ready for this. It's 11 to 11:30. The link will be put up right after the service closes, and it is also available on the website at c3church.ca.
Yeah, and you know what? One thing I'd just say, that if you're watching online today and you just felt like this was helpful for you, like, tell somebody.
Sure.
Like share the link to YouTube. To share it with somebody, because we want to have this conversation, but we actually want to just help people process this stuff we're trying to figure out.
Yeah.
And I haven't got it all figured out. You haven't got it figured out. But we're trying to work it out, and any little bit helps.
And we want people to step into new levels of freedom continuously.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's be the change in the world we really want to be.
Yeah. Isn't that a Michael Jackson song?
Yeah, something like that.
That's also cancel culture.
It's canceled. There we go.
Hey, church, we love you. We're
Love you.
praying for you. We're believing for you. We'll see you next week as we talk purity culture and the church.
Yeah.